Today we're talking about Joker 2, Joker Folie, and that's the only time I'm going to try and pronounce that today. I'm Gil, I am the face and voice of OneTake, and I'm here with my brother Daniel. Say hello.
Hello.
Today I'm going to give a quick recap of the movie, and then we're going to go into discussion, analysis, and our overall thoughts on it. So, Daniel, I'm going to recap it. If you feel like I'm missing any detail or you're just burning to make a comment here or there, feel free to chime in. But otherwise, you ready to go? All right. It's been 2 years since Arthur killed Murray Franklin. Now he's in Arkham State Hospital awaiting trial. He is more emaciated than ever. He is subdued and quiet until he meets Lee, short for Harley Quinzel, at a music therapy class. The two quickly fall in love. One night, she lights a fire, creating a distraction so they can run outside, frolic, and sing together. That gets her taken out of the facility because he is a bad influence on her, supposedly. At the trial, Arthur's lawyer argues that he suffers from split personality. He didn't kill those people. Joker did. The DA, Harvey Dent, calls a couple of witnesses who dispute that claim, including a doctor and his old social worker. Of course, Lee is in the audience for it all. When she becomes a distraction and even interferes by talking to the media, Arthur's lawyer warns him that she is a liar. She had told Arthur that she grew up in his neighborhood, that she was committed after setting fire to her parents' apartment, that her father was dead. But in truth, her father is very much alive. He's a doctor, she lives with her parents in the Upper West Side, and she had herself voluntarily committed. She cops to it all when he calls her out. She committed herself because she wanted to meet Joker, and she only lied to him because she wanted him to like her. And by the way, she's pregnant. The next day, they call Sophie to the stand, his love interest from the first, I don't know, should I use the word love interest? His infatuation from the first movie.
The woman he stalks.
Yeah, well, followed. He stalked her, yes. So Sophie reveals some of what Arthur's mother told her about him. She said that he lived in a fantasy world and that he had this laugh. She called it a dumb laugh. So she made up a story when he was a kid so he'd feel better about it, so he would stop crying, so he wouldn't kill himself. Which, his mother telling all this to Sophie, yeah, I made all that up so he wouldn't kill himself. I definitely think that's how the conversation went. So the story that she told him, that he was put on this earth to bring joy, that's why she called him Happy. And she couldn't believe that he based his whole life around this made-up story, that he became a street clown and wanted to be a comedian. Arthur can't take it anymore. On the spot, he fires his attorney and decides to defend himself. He does so in his Joker outfit and clown makeup. The next witness is Gary Puddles, Arthur's co-worker who saw him kill Randall. While Joker questions him, he mentions the goddamn fat, stupid guards at Arkham who treat him like trash. And Gary tells him how afraid he is, all the time, how he can't sleep. Arthur was the only one who never made fun of him for his short stature, and now he's traumatized him. That night, the guards retaliate for Arthur calling them out publicly. They abuse him. The implication is that they force themselves on him. Next day, in his closing statements, Joker tells the jury that he planned on ranting about the system and how it's all their fault, but instead, he finally admits Joker is an act, a fantasy. Many of his fans, including Harley Quinn, are disgusted, but he still has his acolytes, and when the guilty verdict comes in, they blow up a car bomb at the side of the courthouse. The explosion burns half of Harvey Dent's face and gives Arthur the opportunity to escape. He finds Harley at those famous steps. She abandons him. Without Joker, without the fantasy, they have nothing. He lets himself get taken back to Arkham, where one of his old fans tells him a joke he came up with. A psychopath walks into a bar and sees this famous clown sitting there all alone, totally drunk. It's pathetic. "I can't believe you're here," he says. "What a disappointment. I used to watch you on TV. What can I get you?" And the clown turns and says, Well, if you're buying, you can get me anything. Perfect, the psychopath says. How about I get you what you f***ing deserve? He stabs Arthur in the gut repeatedly and laughs an insane laugh. While Arthur dies, the man carves a Glasgow smile on his own face and laughs some more. Happy ending.
Well, everybody gets what they deserve.
And the movie corrects a major issue with the first movie. This Joker was way too old compared to Batman. The lore never would have worked out. But now he reveals that Arthur isn't the Joker. He's a Joker. And this new Joker is much more age appropriate for Bruce Wayne. So it's definitely fixed.
It solves another issue too, which is like Arthur puts on the Joker persona in the courtroom and other places, but it just makes him flamboyant and stuff and like gregarious. It doesn't make him a criminal mastermind, right? Like It's hard to believe Arthur Fleck is going to be able to pull off any of the types of crazy things that the Joker pulls off. You know, like holding like all of Gotham hostage. This new guy, total blank slate, psychopath. The one thing we saw from him is he's pretty funny. He knows how to craft a joke.
And he's very violent. Funny? Was that you were like the movie?
It
ends
had a narrative
like,
format.
Who's that maniac laughing in the front row?
But yeah, I totally believe this new Joker can fill those big clown shoes better than Arthur Fleck could.
Was that a problem for you though? That I saw some people took issue with the movie, like this Joker could never be a mastermind. At what point in watching the first movie do you finally accept this is not a Batman story? It's not the Joker you know. He's literally just co-opted the image of Joker to tell a story that otherwise nobody would bother watching. And he's
I realize that.
Yeah, I know you realize. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the one person who I saw tweet that complaint after the first Joker. Which, in a sense, maybe...
To be honest... Look, I didn't mean it as that real of a complaint, but I did think they were going to try to tie it in some way.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, they clearly do. Like, okay, there's two components to that ending in terms of being a little bit of an Easter egg. One that's less of an Easter egg. This other Joker, carving a smile on his own face. Which, by the way, there's this weird story. The Hollywood Reporter reported on it. That apparently they wanted the first Joker movie back in 2019. They wanted it to end with one of Joker's fans like carving a smile on his own face. And apparently Christopher Nolan stopped them. He was like, no, only my Joker, the Heath Ledger Joker, can have like a carved smile. And so they didn't do it. Which the idea of Christopher Nolan caring about that just upsets me. Like, why does he care in this other Joker movie? It's got nothing to do with yours. And now he no longer... And then the story is, in Hollywood Reporter, well, he went to go work for, I think, Universal. He left WB because they didn't give Tenet like the full theatrical treatment during COVID or whatever. So now that he's no longer at WB, they're like, oh, we can do the carving smile thing now.
So I did not like Tenet, but I only saw it once. But for a guy who's trying to push the envelope of storytelling, right? Of making a movie with, two different realities going in opposite directions of time, like all this crazy stuff. And for him to be like, but the carving the smile thing, that's mine. Keep your dirty, grimy hands off of it.
Yeah. It doesn't sit right. Well, we've now delayed it long enough. Should we say what we actually thought about this movie? Wait, let's delay it slightly further. What do we think of the first Joker? You can go back and listen to our episode to find out. But the TLDL or W, listen or watch, is that we both liked it. We thought it was a fairly basic story, but it was well told. It was elevated by Joaquin Phoenix's performance, and it was a very tense movie. I kept using the phrase, it felt like you're watching a ticking time bomb with a face. Because Arthur is heading in a dangerous direction, and you're just waiting for that bomb to go off in the movie's climax. So it was a very intense movie. It was a movie that had something to say. I didn't feel like there was a whole lot more to say for a sequel, so I went in with some trepidation. But now we've seen it. Daniel, I'm dying to hear, what did you think?
So, first, just one thought is that, the first movie had that ticking time bomb dimension. It just occurred to me that, like you said, there wasn't much to look forward to in a second movie. So this one, it lacked that. And I think that's part of why. So overall, I liked the movie, but I got bored at times. I felt it was a little slow. And I was just reflecting that really because the thing I enjoyed about the movie was just sort of moment to moment. There were just fun, interesting things going on. Like a lot of lines I just loved, a lot of scenes that were really well done, but I didn't feel that much suspense with the plot in the same way that I did in the first movie. So I think that's a big part of why it felt like for me that it dragged at times. But I still thought like it was mostly enjoyable. Not the type of movie I'd want to watch more than the 2 times I watched it for this discussion because it's just like the first movie. It's just so dark and just not like it's fun the first time when there's novelty. The second time you're just wallowing in sadness. But like it was well done. Like it was a good movie. Definitely does not deserve 30% of Rotten Tomatoes. Like the amount of garbage that comes out these days, I can't believe that Joker is considered one of the worst movies.
It does give me a similar gut reaction as I got with Megalopolis, which is the absolute dismissive attitude toward it. And when I actually scratch under the surface to hear the critiques of this movie, again, it's similar to Megalopolis. I didn't actually scratch that far under the surface to see what people are saying, partly because I don't want to read or listen to in-depth reviews and be swayed one way or the other and just end up parroting what somebody else said. I want to come in with my own fresh thoughts. But at least if I look at the general discourse on Twitter, to some degree Reddit, what I'm seeing is this movie undoes the first movie. This movie hates the fans. It doesn't give them what they want at all. I'm like, whoa, all of a sudden we want movies to just give us what we want? I thought the whole thing is that we don't want movies to be pandering to everybody. Or I guess the idea is we want it to pander to us. We don't want it to pander to somebody else. Like, you know who came out and praised this movie heavily? Francis Ford Coppola. He says Todd Phillips is always one step ahead. Now, I will say, overall, I did not like this movie. And I'll go into why in a second. It's actually a lot of what you said. It just seems like, we put different subjective weight on different aspects of a movie. So certain things bothered me more than maybe they bothered you. But I don't think this movie hates the fans. I don't think it undoes the first movie or anything like that. I think that's the incorrect diagnosis. And I would also say, I think that gets to more of the thematic level. Like if you think this movie's message clashes with the first movie, that I don't think that's why, when you're actively watching the movie, I don't think you're sitting there and the gears are turning like, wait, how does this theme tie into the first movie? Does it fit properly? It's more, am I engaged by this movie? Am I captivated by it? And I think I wasn't, and I think most people weren't. So why is it a bad movie or why doesn't it work? I think you address it on that level. And then you can also talk about the themes, like how does it fit into the first movie's message? And we will talk about that. But here's what I think. So Phoenix and Lady Gaga give strong performances. Do you like my pronunciation there?
Is it Gaga?
No, it's Lady Gaga. I just say it that way to annoy my girlfriend when we're talking about this. The production value is there, just like the first movie. Everything is very well rendered. But at a fundamental story level, it's very lacking. And it's exactly what you said before. There's a couple of things that made the first movie an easy watch. I mean, it's a dark movie. You're watching this person just slide deeper and deeper into mental instability, and it leads to this awful end. It should be a very difficult movie to watch. I don't find it difficult to watch because Arthur is such a fascinating character to meet, to get to know, and to watch him go through that transformation. Plus, you have that tension throughout the movie. It feels like a ticking time bomb. In this movie, I felt virtually none of that tension. I'm not getting to know Arthur because I already kind of know him from the first movie. And for a lot of this movie, he is a lot more subdued. He's less interesting to watch. When he's not subdued, he's in a sort of fantasy musical sequence, which were kind of hit or miss for me. In terms of tension, he's still a dangerous person and you're worried about what he might do. But I don't know, actually, I'm not that worried about what he might do. He doesn't seem as dangerous in this movie. He doesn't seem as ready to commit a violent act. And we never actually see him commit any violent acts in this movie. But even if there was that worry, he's so confined. He's in Arkham or he's at the trial. He's powerless. If he were to get out of control, there's no chance he would actually accomplish anything because there's all the guards around. There's so many people around. There's so little damage he can do. And I don't really feel invested in the trial either. A lot of people describe this movie as a courtroom drama. That was kind of the surprise. You're not expecting it, but Joker 2, it's actually a courtroom drama. And courtroom dramas are usually great for suspense because there's a particular outcome you're hoping for. You want to get the guilty person, or you're hoping this innocent person will be found not guilty. And there's the tension of, will it come out that way or not? But in this movie, I just didn't feel... First off, I don't think Arthur was that invested in the outcome of the trial. So I'm not even with him hoping for a particular outcome. And I don't even know what I want for him. Like, I know he definitely shouldn't be let go out in the wild. He's too dangerous for that. So I'm kind of just watching this trial. It doesn't seem very likely they'll let him out, and I don't think he should be let out. So there's really nothing that engaging in the movie. I just found it very dreary, which is, I think, what the first movie would have been without those tense and fascinating elements. So it's just dreary and at times boring, especially in the middle portion. Like, I think the beginning, I've found lately a lot of times if I don't like a movie, I still enjoy the first act. And so I'm starting to think first acts are a little bit easier because you're introducing new characters, you're introducing a new world. So by default, there's a fascination of where is this going to go? There's a wonder. And then once you settle into kind of the second act, which is the bulk of the movie, in this case, it's where it starts to lose steam for me. Picks up a little bit at the end with the explosion. That's the first time in a while in this movie where I'm like, wait, what's going to happen? This is interesting. And throughout, there are little moments here and there that were these emotional jolts. Sophie revealing what Arthur's mother said about him. It's kind of a gut punch. When he finds out Lee is lying to him, and it goes into that musical sequence that ends with her shooting him in the stomach or the chest. And like I mentioned, the explosion at the end, there's that striking image of a person dressed up as Joker chasing Arthur, which is kind of another moment that sort of symbolizes what the whole movie's about. This persona is chasing him, right? And at times it just started to feel unnecessary. It kind of gave me similar vibes as El Camino. You know, it's this follow-up to Breaking Bad, a show that did not require a follow-up or a sequel. It did require a prequel, but not a sequel. And that's how a lot of people felt about Joker. And then you do get a follow-up, El Camino, and it's like not bad. It's like well executed, but you start to feel like you're watching deleted scenes because they're not necessary. And at times, that's how this movie felt to me.
I think, I mean, I agree. I think that's all very astute. I think one thought I start to have was like, okay, what is the meaningful, like, what is the story this movie is telling that they wanted to tell, right? And it's well, first of all, there's all the same thematic points that were in the first movie about the way the media and the public feeds into this sort of criminal Joker persona. Like, leaving that stuff aside, like, ultimately the story is about Arthur and his sort of psychological journey. And it's the journey of him sort of, like, at the beginning, they're trying to convince him that this Joker's this alter ego. It's him accepting, no, like, this is him. He did all this because he wanted to be somebody, and it was wrong, and he regrets it. Right? It's that journey of him sort of accepting that. And in fact,
I wonder if it is that journey, because did you ever feel that he bought into the narrative that Joker is a separate persona?
Not once. It was total BS, right? And you could tell when he parrots the words of, I blacked out, I saw flashing lights. Like, he says that to the interviewer. He never believes it.
Yeah, so it's less of him accepting it and more of him admitting it.
Yeah, well, okay, but here's the thing, is we do see him retreat into this Joker persona. Like, that's what he does, right? When things get hard, he sort of retreats into that persona. At least in this movie, we can then talk about the first movie, but like, that's what he does in this movie. Like, there are moments where in the courtroom it starts to get stressful and he starts sketching out Joker, like, on his paper, right? Like, and as things get worse and worse, he slips more and more into this alter ego. So that's not him necessarily pretending it's this split personality, but that is him leaning on this Joker persona as a crutch. And at the end, he sort of he says Joker's not real. He abandons the persona.
Right, that's fair. He's decided to. He never believed it was truly an alter ego, a split personality living in his mind, but it was a tool that he was using to, like you said, as a crutch. And he's decided to stop doing that, admit the truth, and just be himself.
But that's like, I guess the thing is, like, that's not actually that interesting of a story, is it? Like, or at
No.
least the way they told it is not. You don't feel that throughout the movie. Yeah, I mean, maybe it would have worked better if he really did buy into, if at the beginning of the movie he thought this is, oh yeah, wow, like that explains everything. I have a split personality, right? Like if he bought into that and created a real delusion that he breaks free of, I could believe that more. The other issue is because that's not a meaningful story. This story ends up being a lot more driven by Harley Quinn, who's also like entertaining, but she's just, it's kind of obvious what's going on the whole movie, right? Like that's a pretty flat story also.
Yeah, and the reveal that she's been lying and everything happens around the halfway point, I think. So it's not like you're waiting for the shoe to drop of like, wow, she's been manipulating him. We kind of know it a little bit. Like we can see it through it more and earlier than Arthur can. So there's like some tension there. You're waiting for the reveal to hit him, but it feels like so much less than in the first movie. Where there's that sense of danger. When he's backed into a corner, when he becomes Joker, we're worried about what he's going to do. I'm not worried about that in this movie. And going back to what you said before about, how interesting a journey is it to watch him go from using the Joker persona to kind of letting it go. It probably also would have been more satisfying if we didn't find him at the beginning of this movie. He's not using the Joker persona. He's already kind of put it aside and is just, and you can reason out why. Like he's medicated, so to some extent he's not fully in control of his wits anyway. So you can explain why he's put the Joker persona aside, but as a viewing experience, you see him as not Joker, so it does feel like he's regressed from the first movie, regressed from the first movie's ending. So you have in some way rewound from that interesting arc, and then you see him slip back into Joker again, but it's not as fun to watch as in the first movie, and then kind of let go. So it's just the shape of the movie. It's not a very interesting journey. But what is it trying to say? So I feel like the first movie had a pretty clear message, right? It's about people. How do we treat people with mental illness who require a support system? They need help. They don't have anywhere to get it. And the movie's showing you here's a cost to letting that fester. So what does Joker 2 add to that story?
I think it adds a lot more to, first of all, one thing we talked about with the first movie was that Joker should have seemed a little less like happy at the end, right? I think that was one of the concerns, right, with the first movie that had some legitimacy behind it, is that like Joker kind of gets a lot of what he wants at the end of the first movie, is he gets the adulation he's seeking. Now, of course, we know that's empty. We know he's going to end up back in jail, and we know he's a mass killer and he's not going to be happy. But it's like the movie doesn't really hit you over the head with that. And so, there was sort of a mixed message there. I mean, not really. Like I think the movie is clearly not endorsing being, a mass murderer. So I don't know, but maybe some people claim, right, the first movie does kind of endorse it, and that's why this movie cuts back on it by saying, like, no, look, it's really bad to be a mass murderer.
Right. Well, yeah, that what you just pointed out of at the end of the movie, he does feel like he's feeling good, right? At the end of the first Joker. We know things aren't going to go well for him in his future, but it doesn't seem like he's aware of that. So on an emotional level, maybe it feels like he doesn't pay enough of a price, and it feeds into that, what was a media narrative at the time, that this movie maybe endorses his behavior. But that was you and me sort of bending our brains into a pretzel to try and understand that view, because we always felt like if you watch that movie, and you worry that some people are going to think it's an endorsement of Joker's actions, you have to sort of like cover your eyes and your ears and just not pay attention to the movie. Because if you left that movie on like a high and you're like, yeah, let's go burn down the system and let's go crazy, it's just not what you're bringing something that the movie isn't giving you. But it does feel to some extent like maybe Todd Phillips took it to heart, that criticism. And so there's some overcorrection here. Strip away all the fun of Joker, strip away all the glamour, and show in stark reality, no, this guy Arthur, he's a bad guy. And don't worry, he's going to get what's coming to him. He's going to get what he deserves. I don't know if that's really what was going through his head, but some people are definitely reading it that way. And I can definitely see why you would feel like you're a target for his criticism if you read it that way, because it almost feels like an accusation. Like, look, when I watched the first movie, I was not endorsing Joker's behavior, and I didn't think of him as a hero. And now all of a sudden in Joker 2, you're criticizing me for thinking that way and showing me, no, who are you arguing with here?
Well, and the movie in a way, if there were fans who felt that way about the first movie, that they looked at Joker as a hero, then they would definitely see this movie as condemning them directly, right? Because this movie focuses, like, that theme was there in the first movie of the way the media and the public feeds into Joker's delusion. But this movie is way more about that, right? The name of the movie is, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but it's like Shared Delusion or something, right? This whole movie like is about that, right? And even after the explosion, like they're trying to force him to be Joker, right? Like the guy's dressed as Joker, huge fan. They try to bring him along with him, and obviously Lady Gaga, the whole movie is pushing for this delusion of the Joker. So, I mean, you definitely could see this movie as saying like, look, fans who somehow got the wrong message, you're wrong. Joker's evil. How do you not see that?
Well, and I feel like that's a very small percentage of the population, which I guess would explain the box office for this movie. He's catering to a very small audience, so it's doing exactly what it was meant to. I think like you said, so the movie is focusing on the sensationalism aspect more, which is actually a line that Joker uses when that guy's interviewing him. All you care about is sensationalism, which gave me vibes again of the part of the movie I hated most in the first Joker, when he's doing his whole diatribe to Murray Franklin, and he just feels way too coherent and way too self-aware of what's going on. So I got flashes of that here. But yeah, the way that we take celebrities, the famous, or we take killers, the infamous, and we turn them into something more than they are through media sensationalism, when really they're just people. And now, some people are saying that this movie's in conflict with the first movie. And it's kind of like the first movie says, we have an issue with mental illness, and it's almost like saying it's the system's fault. And then is it that this movie is saying, no, it's not the system's fault, it's Arthur's fault? Is that what the movie's saying?
I mean, it's both, right? Like the movie's saying both, like,
which I think is obvious. I think it's not saying no, it's Arthur's fault. It's saying yes, flawed system, but also personal responsibility. So I think this movie, it's taking the same theme. It's looking at it from a different angle. So it's less from Arthur's perspective, and now it's looking at the media sensationalism side. And Lady Gaga, Harley Quinn, she essentially becomes the personification of that. And also, it's adding more nuance. So where the first movie focused on, I think what Todd Phillips would say, is something we don't focus on enough, so we focused on the system, here he's just bringing some of that nuance in, saying, yes, but also Arthur made the choice to do those things. Now, I will say, I feel like this movie loses some of the societal aspect. There's no Thomas Wayne here. There's none of the kind of class division in this movie, aside from some of the signs you see people holding. And so I feel like it is missing something by not delving into why people are drawn to the Joker figure. It just kind of takes it as a given that Harley Quinn's a big fan of his, in that all these people want to follow him. And I feel like if this movie wants to add more nuance, and where the second act I feel like was dragging quite a bit, maybe there was room there to add something exploring why people look to this Joker figure. Why do we do this? That might have added something interesting to the conversation too. But what did you think about we haven't really talked about the musical aspect very much. How did you feel about it? I mean, coming up to this movie, they were very cagey about it. Like, it's not a musical. Because there is a thing in Hollywood where people are afraid of musicals. Like, anytime a musical is coming out, you watch the trailer, there's very little singing in it. Like, even that new movie, Wicked, you watch that trailer, you might not realize it's a musical, because if people know that that's what it is, nobody's going to go see it. So this movie, there were very mixed messages. It is a musical. It's kind of a musical. It's not a musical. What were your impressions?
So I liked when the music was blended into the movie sort of seamlessly, and when it was diegetic. Diegetic. When nice. It's like in the movie. Like, I like at the end when Arthur
yes.
is like telling Harley, like, please, I'm still the same guy. Like, you know, and he wants to run away with her. And she starts singing, and he's like, please stop singing. And that is like, she's singing in real life. I liked those moments. When the very first song where he's singing, he's smoking the cigarette in prison, he's singing, finally I have somebody who needs me. He's singing all this, and then it turns out it's all in his head. I felt very cheated. And I did not like that, because all of a sudden, like, okay, all these musical numbers, or most of them, they give me insight into what's going on in his head, which we didn't really need. We knew what was going on in his head. And it doesn't progress the plot. And then a lot of cool scenes in the trailer, they're in his head. Like, so
like when he hits the one everyone talks about, yes. When he hits the judge with the hammer. Yeah.
So I felt very cheated by those musicals. Like, and that's, I think, part of the issue of why this movie, you know, it just felt very small in a way. Like, there's all this stuff going on. But a lot of it felt like it was just Joker and Harley and his imagination, which, like, it's just not as interesting. It doesn't up the stakes.
Yeah, I had this, as I'm watching the movie, I had this sinking feeling as I'm realizing, okay, everything cool in the trailer, anything interesting, I can already tell it's all going to be fantasy. And the movie does feel very confined. That's something I mentioned earlier. And I think that's part of because I could see somebody like kind of responding to that. You know, the movie feels too small. And they'll say, you can make a small movie. Like, but I don't think.
Yeah, and then it'll have small box office.
Yeah, exactly. Numbers. You probably shouldn't spend $200 million to make it. You can't undervalue that a movie needs to be engaging. It needs to keep your attention, or else all the themes and all the things you want to say, nobody's going to pay attention to. And if you're going to do a small movie, then usually that requires very strong character development, really high dramatic stakes. You don't need action. I don't think this movie, it doesn't have enough for it. It doesn't have those stakes, even on a small scale. So it just, okay, in lieu of action sequences, which I was not expecting at all going in, but I was expecting something. In lieu of that, you need to offer something else. And this movie didn't really, aside from some musical fantasy sequences. And I think what you were saying, so when you think of musical numbers in a musical, they can serve a few different purposes. If you think of like Les Mis, the songs are the action of the movie, the show, or the movie adaptation. 90% of the dialogue is song, so it is the action, it is the exposition. But then it also will accomplish a couple of other things. When you're singing, you can reveal your inner thoughts, right? It doesn't have the same restriction as dialogue, because music, it exists in this weird place between reality and fantasy. So a character can just sing out an inner monologue. The other thing it does, though, is it lets you sort of simmer with certain emotions. So, for example, the moment you mentioned where he's singing about how he finally has love after so much loneliness, it basically, if this weren't a musical, you would get a moment where he meets Lee and then he walks away with a smile on his face and you can tell he's happy and the scene would be over. But instead, you simmer in that joy for a couple of minutes because now he gets to sing about it for a bit. But like you said, in terms of inner thoughts, it's not revealing anything we don't already know at any point in the movie. I mean, anytime, it's like the songs are so literal. It's like, I just met somebody I love. Well, let me sing a song about meeting somebody I love. It's not telling you anything new. And in terms of just reveling in the emotion, sometimes I get a degree of that, like I'm feeling something, and then the song sort of amplifies that feeling and lets you live with it a little bit longer. But other times when I'm just feeling kind of bored, or like I said, kind of dreary, the music just feels, I start to get impatient. I'm like, okay, let's just get back to the actual story and moving the plot forward. Yeah, so I found it very hit or miss. Like I do think I heard some people before the movie came out were saying that Joaquin Phoenix can't really sing very well. I'll say that never bothered me. I think he's good enough. And I don't know, I always have this musical logic where I'm like, okay, if someone is a bad singer, right, that means their voice is like not good to hear in your ears. It's offensive to the senses. But when Joker talks and he has this crazy laugh, it doesn't sound good to your ears. So not every song in the logic of a musical reality should sound perfect. And I feel like, I don't know, Joaquin Phoenix's singing voice felt appropriate to the Joker character. And I think I agree with you. I think I preferred the ones where they're singing in real life and it's this like drab set, but Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga are the only things kind of bringing life to that set. As disappointing as it was that some of the stuff happening in that courtroom sequence where they're singing and killing people, okay, none of it was real. That could be a little disappointing, but it was just a visually interesting thing to see. Drab courtroom and these two characters kind of bringing it to life. But one of the moments you mentioned, I really liked, and I think this is where they used the musical aspect really well. When in that final confrontation where Arthur goes up to Harley and she keeps singing and he's trying to get her to stop, it kind of shows you how the musical aspect of this movie represents something. It represents that escape into fantasy. And he's like, I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to be in reality right now. And I found that very heartbreaking. She wouldn't just stop. By the way, that's also a moment where he reminds her that she's pregnant. She's not really pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think so. remember the scene she reveals? Wait, I wrote down, because this scene was so funny. Oh my God. Wait 1 second. Okay. They have this really funny scene, right, where she visits him in prison. And she explains, yeah, she lied about stuff. She just wanted to meet him. And then she goes, I moved into your old apartment building so we can live there after. And he's like, I don't want to live there. And then he goes, I'm pregnant. And takes a hit from her cigarette.
Yeah, it's like, here's everything I lied about. I lied about this. I lied about that. By the way, I'm pregnant. Yeah, it was very clearly a manipulation tactic because she.
Oh, and then she starts to sing also.
Right. So it's such a great moment to pair with the ending because you see she uses the music as a distraction. As soon as she can feel that he's starting to separate from her and starting to doubt her, she manipulates him with this lie, presumably a lie, that she's pregnant, and manipulates him by once again escaping into this fantasy musical world.
One other complaint about this, not really a complaint, but an observation is, Arthur gets what he deserves. The interviewer literally asks him, do you think you deserve to die? And he says at one point he did think that, but now he's better, he's on medication, whatever. I think by the end, I think he does accept, his death is, he's kind of given up on everything, right? And he knows that he's really guilty to the core. Harley doesn't get what she deserves. Right, is in this storyline. I mean, Harley is very bad. I mean, she doesn't kill anybody, but she wanted to build a mountain, right? Ostensibly, I'm guessing on bodies, right? Like, I think she would love to go kill a bunch of people with the Joker. And I don't know what, she'll go pair up with this new Joker guy, or who knows what, and maybe just continue to have some fun.
Yeah, actually, that ending scene where just before Arthur gets what he deserves, I feel like there was the movie kind of came back for me a bit at the end for the last probably about 20 minutes. The explosion and afterward, pretty much everything from that point on was pretty interesting. And when that guy comes up to him to tell that final joke, it's really sad. The encouraging smile on
Yeah.
Arthur's face. And like as the guy's telling the joke, Arthur gives this like little laugh. It's not that funny what he's saying, but Arthur's just trying to be encouraging. Like I used to be this big stand-up comedian. You're trying to follow in my footsteps, and then the way it goes after that is just so sad.
You know, I mean, I like a lot. I did enjoy like still a lot of the explorations of Arthur's psyche. You know, there's his struggle of like how can he find meaning in life, right? Like his final joke is, knock knock, who's there? Arthur Fleck who, right? And like that's so much of what he struggles with is the fact that he's a nobody, right? But that moment of like the psychopath telling a joke to him, like you have a moment where Arthur feels he does kind of feel like he has a role there, which is like, yeah, he's the guy who tells jokes in prison. Oh, look at this like young protege trying to tell a joke in prison. But like there's a world where Arthur could have accepted that small role. And I have two examples of where that could have happened, but he goes the wrong direction. One is with the with Puddles, who like he was nice to Puddle. Like Puddles actually really liked him, right? Like Arthur meant something to Puddles. And of course, Arthur destroys that, right? By violently murdering somebody in front of Puddles and like traumatizing Puddles. But like I think that's part of why Joker feels really hurt when Puddles calls him out for that. Because that was a good role Arthur could have played in life, right? He didn't need to be so important, but he meant something to Puddles and he could have meant something to others. And then the other example is to the prison guards. Look, they're assholes, right? But he actually fit in with them. Like they were kind of nice to him. They liked him. He told jokes. Like I don't think, I'm sure at times they were making fun of him. They did genuinely like him to some extent. And then he insults them on live TV. And the Irish guard says to him after, like, do you know how hard it is to bring a little joy into this place? And then they sodomize him, right? But like they were trying to bring joy into the place to some extent, and he was part of that. And I don't know, I think you feel that in this movie is he could have been somebody in a very small way, but I don't know, but he couldn't accept that and instead became a killer.
Yeah, and I would say the guards, at first they come off as, okay, they're kind of assholes, and you can understand why, but maybe there is, and they're often exploiting Arthur. Most of the time, it seems like they are laughing at him, not with him, but there are moments where you're like, there's a little bit of, they like having him around, and then they turn outright evil. And I did think that scene that everyone's talking about where they assault him, it's like a very serious and horrible thing. And I'll say when it happened, I did have a feeling of I don't think this movie has not earned using such serious subject matter. It's almost like the movie needs to be better and more nuanced. Uh, I don't know. It felt complicated to me. Like I don't know that the movie it felt wrong to me. But I will say, it does bring up a question of why Arthur gives up the Joker act. And I think that was a big part of it. I think it was sort of twofold. I think it's the Gary Puddles sequence. That's probably the first time I think he's truly confronted with the consequences of his actions. Is he killed people in the first movie, and all he got was adulation from the public. And the people who condemned him were people that he did not put any stock in their opinion. Murray Franklin had betrayed him by that point. Thomas Wayne had betrayed him, and those are the two people most publicly condemning what he did. So I don't think he ever really felt any kind of consequences from what he did. And then finally he meets this person, and you can see he's genuinely thrown off. He's like, Gary, like, I was nice to you. I said I wasn't going to hurt you, and I didn't hurt you. But he doesn't realize that he has hurt this person very much. He has such a simplistic mind. To him, hurting somebody means physically attacking them. He doesn't realize how much he broke Gary by making him witness this traumatic thing. And Gary makes a great point that Arthur was the only person who was nice to him. And what is it like to lose that one person? I mean, that essentially happened to Arthur in the first movie. He looked up to Murray Franklin, and then Murray betrayed him, like this one bright spot in his life. And I think Arthur is confronted with the fact that, I mean, it's not quite the same level, but he was essentially the Murray Franklin in Gary's life in a way. I think it's that. So he's confronted with the consequences of his actions. And then what the guards do to him in the prison. This is a time also where the Joker persona did nothing for him. It didn't protect him. He even tries to tell a joke. He tries to stop them. It doesn't work. So by morning, he sees that this Joker persona has no utility to him. And yes, it is actually damaging one of the only people he likes. And so I think it's those two things are what cause him to kind of give up that persona.
Yeah, and I mean after the incident in the prison, he's lying on the floor of his cell, and he has a flashback to right after he murdered those bankers on the train. He has a flashback to him in his Joker persona, like in that bathroom, right? So he has a flashback to the Joker, and I think he's kind of thinking about it. And at the same time as this flashback, one of the other inmates, I think like one who was like kind of his friend, gets murdered by the guards, right? They rough him up because he won't stop talking, and he dies. And I think that's a moment where like he's reflecting on the Joker persona. It didn't protect him, and suddenly things have gotten so real, right? He was just so brutally treated, and this other prisoner is dying right next to him. And I think it's just, it just got really real for him.
And he's just crying. It's not even his, laughing kind of cry, which is fascinating and horrible to listen to. It's just him quietly crying in the dark. And by the way, a couple things. That other inmate who gets killed, at that moment, he's trying to sing, "Oh, when the saints," which I found, there are things in this movie where I think if it were a more successful movie would become, sort of iconic, things that stick around. Like in the first movie, his dance down the stairs is this iconic image now. Like I found myself humming that song, after leaving the theater. And it was this, and it had a lot of strange emotions attached to it because it's the guard humming it and singing it often.
Yep.
And it's an ironic song because it's about sort of that apocalyptic moment when like the rapture's happening and it's the saints marching into heaven. And obviously all these prisoners are nowhere near following those saints. But they also sing it back to the guard, I think as a way to sort of mock him. There's that one scene where all the prisoners kind of start singing it together. And this prisoner tries to do it as kind of his last gasp, and they end up strangling him to death. And also the flashback you mentioned, it's not precisely a flashback because we see something a little different than we saw in the first movie. So the moment you're referring to, in the first movie, after he kills the 3 Wall Street guys, he goes to that terrible bathroom and then does that strange dance. And the funny thing is, the original plan for that scene is that he was going to run into the bathroom in a panic and kind of wash the clown makeup off. And then on the day of shooting, they came up with this other idea to have him dance instead. In this movie, when he has the flashback to the bathroom, it's not him dancing, it's the original scene. It's him washing the clown makeup off. So he's remembering that moment where he essentially embraced the Joker persona for the first time, realized how comfortable, confident, and powerful it made him, but he's washing it off. So it's his internal thought process. You're seeing him erase Joker. And then the next morning, that's when he gives his speech about how he was going to give this big, angry diatribe, but instead, it's an act, and the act is finished.
I do, the way the guards treat him in the prison, I think I agree that this isn't a good enough movie to have it in there. Like, that was, it almost, look, this movie delves into dark themes, obviously, but, like, it's not Shawshank Redemption. And it was almost like it felt incongruous. I saw this with a group of friends also, and I felt like all of us came out of the movie and we all asked each other, we were like, so did they in the prison, did they really do that to him? And we were like, yeah, I guess so. But we kind of had, I don't know, we had like a little trouble believing it because it's like it's a DC movie, I don't know. It just, I feel like maybe it should be a better movie if they're going to have something that horrible in it.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I don't know if better is even the right word. It's like a more mature movie. That it's like mature enough to handle those themes. And I get why they did it. They reveal that So in the first movie, when they talk about the abuse he suffered
Oh yeah.
as a child, I don't think they said sexual abuse.
I remembered, yeah, they I don't think they did either, because my ears perked up when they said that in the courtroom.
Right. So they add that detail here. And so they're trying to draw the parallel of the thing that fractured his mind. And maybe I shouldn't say fracture because that implies I'm endorsing the split personality view. But the thing that first set him on this path was the abuse he suffered as a child. And so the thing that kind of ends the Joker act, is something that parallels that same sort of abuse. So I see what they were going for. And I don't know, when you try to break down the logic of it, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, but like also his he doesn't really have a Joker persona before he murders those Wall Street guys. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he didn't have the Joker persona his whole life.
It's not
It's
that
very
clean
different.
of like, yeah, it's not that clean of, okay, that's where the Joker persona was born. It's more like that's where the mental instability was born. That one day coagulates into Joker. And I guess what this movie would say is it never really did. It was more he just saw, hey, I mean, you literally see him rehearsing for the Murray Franklin show. Like, it is an act he's putting on.
Yeah.
And that's when Joker becomes a persona. It's when the public first meets him, and it's personified as a character, right? That's the moment it happens. But what did you think? We didn't talk at all, and I didn't even mention the opening of this movie was a Looney Tunes inspired animation. What did you think about that whole cartoon? And I guess I'll just quickly recap what happened in it. It's basically Joker arriving for some kind of show. I'm not sure if it's meant to be live with Murray Franklin, but his shadow starts to come alive. When he gets on stage, the shadow takes his place, causes all kinds of chaos. And then when the cops arrive, the shadow kind of recombines with Arthur, Joker. So when the cops show up, Arthur himself takes the beating, kind of in the shadow's place. But what did you make of that whole animated sequence?
I mean, it's very clear thematically. Besides that, I don't know. I mean, it didn't. I don't know. It
Yeah,
it didn't really stick with me.
I thought it was a fun way to start the movie.
Yeah.
It was just a strange thing that you're not expecting. It is weird because, like, what is this cartoon? It feels like it's a mood setter, and it puts you in the mind to think about Joker and Arthur as two different characters, or think of Arthur with this shadow, this alter ego, and it sort of implies that in the first movie, it wasn't exactly Arthur himself, right? It was this shadow that caused all these problems, and then he's the one who has to suffer the consequences, which is the argument that his defense attorney is making in this movie, that it's a split personality. But of course, by the end of the movie, that's all disputed. So it almost feels like the animation it's like a manipulation. It's to make you accept a certain mindset and think about the movie from a certain framing, only for the movie later on to say, nope, you were wrong, partly because we lied to you in the opening. And I'm not sure if that's what they were going for, or if it's just, I mean, to some extent, it's an experimental movie, similar to Megalopolis. Maybe that's why Francis Ford Coppola is going to bat for it. But they're trying different things. I mean, the way that they incorporate the musical aspects, and maybe this opening animation is, let's just try something. Here's a cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, it also it ties into this theme of, like, you know, the media creating these types of delusions, right? Is even the movie itself, right, is like trying to trick us into accepting this delusion. And then, of course, the media, I mean, it's like cartoons, right, which everyone's familiar with.
Yeah, I think that's right. Is there anything else, Daniel, we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up?
You know, the other thing I just keep thinking about is, like, just how disturbing the Joker Harley relationship is, right? Is, like, obviously Arthur has, like, all of these issues with his mother. You know, he had this sort of very involved, I was gonna say, like, domineering mother, maybe just like a very his mother was very influential in his life, right? Fed into his delusion, right? It was like making up this, like, you're here to make people happy thing. also, allowed him to be abused horribly, right? So this extremely complicated relationship. And then Harley sort of jumps into that role. She's in charge the whole relationship and manipulating him. Even, their scene where they're intimate with each other in prison, right, is like, it's really, it's gruesome because, he's like happy to see her, but she wants him to put on the makeup, right? He wants to be with his true self, right? It's obviously not Arthur, and that's the whole thing, right? She's in love with the Joker, which is just so horrible. And I mean, Arthur also like asks when they're like intimate. Arthur asks Harley to like help like guide him in.
Right.
Like he can't, he can't like take charge, and it's just like, just the level to which he's being manipulated, and his like his and the fact that she has like a graduate degree in psychology, like the whole thing is just, I don't know, it's just so disturbing and unpleasant.
Yeah, agreed with all the above. I was thinking about Harley Quinn, and we don't really delve much into why she's drawn to Joker, and I think that could have made for a more interesting movie to delve further into that. It also would have been a way further into that theme of the sensationalism and why are we drawn to these figures? Why do they become larger than life? And I let my mind wander a little into what are other versions of this movie that I think could have been more successful. And I mentioned earlier how I might have mentioned this, how Phillips specifically said for the follow-up, we didn't want to do the expected cliche thing, where now that he's embraced the Joker persona, he becomes the supervillain, he's robbing banks, etc. He didn't want to do that. And I understand the inclination not to. You already did one movie that subverted expectations, and you want to keep that going. And I respect that. You're trying to do something different. But I wonder if maybe that's the direction they should have gone. Because I said it earlier, but you can't undervalue the fact that your movie has to be engaging. And if you're not going to be able to pull it off with this kind of small courtroom drama, one way to have been more exciting would be to show us this version of Joker trying to be like the version of Joker we know. But obviously he can't be. He's not a criminal mastermind. But you know who's pretty smart and manipulative? Harley Quinn in this movie. What if her and these other Jokers, his acolytes, break him out at the beginning of the movie instead of the end of the movie, and they are the ones that are kind of pulling the strings and using him as a figurehead in this world of crime? You could have told the same story thematically where he's being manipulated. The persona's kind of bigger than him. And imagine those scenes, like think of The Departed, where you have a character who's undercover. They've been undercover for way too long and they want out, but they can't get out. There's no way. Like picture Arthur in that scene, in that scenario, and how disturbing it would be that he doesn't have the mental wherewithal to even understand fully what's going on.
It's like Fight Club, right? Where, all of a sudden he's in so deep in this entire criminal organization that he's built, right? You could see that, but with Joker in that role. I thought we were going to get something like that based on the trailer. Again, I do feel a little lied to with the trailer, is they show all this violence in the courtroom. So I thought, okay, early on in the movie, we're going to be at trial, and they're going to like take the whole courtroom hostage, and escape. And we saw scenes of them like putting on shows on a stage and like blowing everybody up. Like, maybe I'm naive, but like I thought maybe they broke into a theater performance and they have people holding them hostage, like I thought what I was seeing was real. I didn't think, and it was all a dream, like I didn't expect that. Like, and that's BS. Like that is, I don't like that.
What I was picturing is when I saw Joker and Harley, in big lights in the trailer, I had a similar thought where I'm like, somehow they get this variety show. Like, I don't know, maybe he's still in prison, but they have somebody else acting as Joker, but then he takes over and actually shows up and they get the real Joker and they're going to like gas the crowd with poison like Joker often does in the cartoons. I don't know that I ever really believed that's what was going to happen, but I was wondering, I was like, is that where they're going with this? But no, like you said, it's a musical fantasy sequence.
I want my money back. You can't lie like that.
There was also the fact that it was a $200 million budget, and so you're like, they must have spent that money somewhere. But it turns out, I guess, it was just Joaquin Phoenix's salary, Lady Gaga's salary. I don't know what
Who did a
else.
good job, to be fair.
Yeah, they did a good job. We should also mention Brendan Gleeson. Is that his name?
Oh
I
yeah, I
always forget
like
his
him.
first name. Yeah, he played the guard. I thought he did a great job too. I mean, this is another one of those movies similar to Napoleon, where there's issues on the story level, and then once you get to the actual execution, the way it looks, the way everybody's acting, I feel like people are giving it their all. And I saw some people wondering, was this movie bad on purpose? Is that the point? Kind of like people say the same thing about Matrix Resurrection, which I don't agree with that narrative. I don't think that movie was bad on purpose. This is a slight side rant. But yes, the movie was obviously satirical on the idea of franchising stuff, continuing things past the point where they should be continued. But that satire was all in the first half of the movie. And then it turns into a generic sci fi action. So, what was the satire there? I don't think anybody makes a bad movie on purpose except for really specific circumstances. But do you know how hard it is to make a movie? Can you imagine dedicating like a year of your life toiling away, long nights, and not only you, but subjecting the whole crew, the whole cast, everyone's dedicating
And then your
themselves
audience.
and your audience all to make a bad movie? Very hard for me to wrap my head around that. I don't think Todd Phillips was trying to make a bad movie here.
Yeah, I mean this is kind of what I said at the beginning. I mean, you have a better like way of describing these things, right? Is like I said, I enjoyed the spectacle, right? Like I enjoyed each scene, but yes, I think because of the story, like it doesn't all tie together. And I guess that's what makes it like, I said it was a good movie because I enjoyed a lot of it, but like the fact that it doesn't hold together, that it doesn't really have a good story, right? That's what makes it like not a very good movie. Um, but yeah, I mean, they executed it so well. Like I took so many notes on just so many scenes I loved and moments that were so good. And a big part of that is like the writing is really good, the execution's good, and Joaquin Phoenix is awesome. There's just so many scenes like when the woman he stalked in the first movie, when she says, that night he broke into my apartment, maybe if I had called the police that night, all those people wouldn't have died. And it cuts to Joker going like,
Yeah, that was. There were these moments
hysterical.
where they were like disturbing and also kind of funny at the same time. That was one of them. Yeah, that shrug of like, yeah, maybe it's good. It's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
And I mean, Joaquin Phoenix crushes it, right? Because you really see Arthur Fleck like coming through in the Joker persona there. Yeah, like that's really good. And then, I mean, Joker going up with the fake Southern accent saying puddles? Puddles, really? He doesn't
You
believe
expect
Puddles
us
is
to
real name?
believe? Well, I also like when he kind of breaks character for a second. He's like, "Wait, really? That's your actual name?" Or when he asks, "Did you watch me on the Murray Franklin show?" He's like, "Wait, really? You didn't see any of that?"
You didn't see everything I had to say?
Yeah, his accent will slip when he's genuinely shocked and things
Yeah.
don't go the way he expects. Yeah, those were good moments.
And yeah, I mean, yeah. Like I liked so much of what he did in it. Um I had another one on the tip of my tongue I wanted to bring up, but I can't remember it now.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say, like, that's why at the beginning of this, I hesitate to say I hated the movie. I mean, I will say there were times I hated it. I mean, there were parts of the movie, like I said, especially in the middle portion, where I was glancing at my watch, like, okay, come on. Like, I was just starting to get that anxious feeling of like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be watching this anymore. It's just going on way too long. But somebody I follow from one of my favorite podcasts, Tell Him Steve Dave, Walt, he was tweeting yesterday. He actually liked the movie. And he said something along the lines of internet backlash is going to kill creativity. And I did get a sense of that where I'm like, I like that he's trying different things. And I feel like people are right to not like this movie. And everybody can have their own reasons for not liking it. But I do wonder if some people have misdiagnosed it. And the problem isn't that he's kind of gone an unexpected way. The problem isn't that he's sort of stripped Joker away and said, "Hey, it was all an act." I think the problem, a lot of it, was the execution of the story. That he didn't explore that theme enough. Uh, I like. I guess what I'm trying to say, the TLDR, is I like that he tried different things. I think it's cool that he's experimenting with this, bringing a musical into it, but using it for an explicit purpose where singing represents escape into fantasy. I don't want to stifle creativity. But yeah, the sad reality is it's just not a good movie. It's a bad movie, I think.
But do you think, I mean, does the internet feed into this more? I mean, people have always, people have always either liked a movie or not. People have checked reviews, I think, to decide whether they wanted to see something or not. Now, even that, I guess, is a change. Like, I don't know. I imagine, when I think about like when our dad was going to the movies growing up, like he would just, skip school every day and just go to the movies and see whatever was on, right? Is we have a lot more curation now, right? Like you're not, like back in the day, I think a bunch of random people would have just seen Megalopolis, right? But now people look up the reviews and they're like, oh, it's experimental, it has bad reviews, and then they don't go see it. Like maybe that's more it. It's just like the whole industry that's formed around curation, which is partly fueled by the internet.
I'll say what it feels like is that narratives form more than they used to. Like people will there'll be this like universal agreement around a particular narrative. And I guess I don't want to come off like the internet's wrong and I have all the answers. I think what it more comes down to is that nuance gets lost in these headlines where a narrative forms and then all people have in their minds is that narrative. But even that's probably unfair. I don't know what's in people's minds.
But I mean, that's what part of the theme of this movie, obviously, right? Is like a narrative forms around Joker and then he embraces it, right? Like they take this simplified view of a complicated person, but that then even actually simplifies him because he adopts that simplification, right? And I do think that's something like, yeah, I also I intentionally try to not look up the reviews before we're going to discuss something because I do know that it can influence me. And the internet, we've talked about this a lot, is like, you're scrolling Twitter or Instagram or whatever, is like, you can easily start to go down a path where they're trying to put you into a certain like identity, right? And, you follow some certain nutritionist or whatever, and all of a sudden you're like so totally committed to like, the carnivore diet or vegan or whatever, right? Like the internet has this power of like pushing you down a track that simplifies your identity and your view of the world. I could totally see that downstream having an impact on the ability to be creative in filmmaking and in art generally.
Yeah. Well, there was actually a story recently. I only looked at the headline. I didn't look at the details. But studios
don't let those details corrupt you. That's good.
Movie studios, I think, are becoming more and more afraid of fan backlash, and so they're planning to create these like fan panels so they can run stuff by them before the movie comes out.
Huge mistake.
Yeah, so I think we're seeing it in action, where we're going to get actual genuine pandering, where it's like, is this okay? Is it okay if we do this? So I'll say this: if you are listening to this review, you are not one of these people. You have a very nuanced mind. You see through the narratives and you go into the details. We're not talking to you. We're talking about
just for the record.
People.
I am one of those people, though. Like I'm who you're talking to.
Yeah, you're the one who buys into the pithy narratives.
That's why I have to avoid them.
Stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because look, you can't. I don't think you can have fan panels to create a movie. Now, you can create Marvel blockbusters, whatever, that way. Well, even then, only for so long, because it's the classic. I was about to say Francis Ford Coppola, the classic Henry Ford thing of, if you ask people what they wanted, they would have said they wanted faster horses, right? Look, I'm not an artist, right? Maybe one day I'll be able to become a filmmaker or something, right? But like with my current skill and expertise, I'm not an artist. I can't make a good movie. And I probably really can't criticize one that well either, right? Now, if something is good, maybe I'll enjoy it. Even, there are probably good movies that I can't yet appreciate, right? And so, like, a fan is not going to tell you how to create a great work of art. It's not going to happen. Like, that takes an actual skilled filmmaker. There's a reason you're employing the filmmaker and not some random fan.
Yeah. Now, I think this movie could have used a few more drafts, and Todd Phillips should have run it by some of his filmmaker friends maybe and gotten some notes and improved it. I saw one article that was speculating, or like producers were talking about why this movie didn't do well. And it was like, well, the young male audience couldn't relate to Lady Gaga. That's not the problem with this movie. But I just feel like I keep hearing people, this is what I'll say. I keep listening to this diagnosis of why didn't this movie work? And I feel like I haven't heard the answer yet. And I feel like the answer is that it's not an engaging story. It's what we talked about. I think it just doesn't keep your attention. There's no tension. You don't care about the outcome of the trial. You're not worried about the direction Arthur is going, not nearly as much as you were worried in the first movie. His performance is a lot less fascinating, except for how much weight he lost. In that opening scene, he looks even worse than in the first movie. And I think Todd Phillips said, like, I don't want you to lose weight again. Like, it's not healthy. But Joaquin Phoenix is like, I have to commit to the role. We got to do this right. So I think it looks like he lost even more weight than in the first movie.
Does
all right,
Joaquin
I feel like
Phoenix, does he play any roles where he's not, like, sick?
Sick?
Yeah, like in the head. I just picture Joker, Commodus, Napoleon.
Who's Commodus?
Oh, Gladiator.
Oh, Gladiator. Yeah, that's right.
By the way, it is funny. I don't know. It just happened to be during the Joker movie. Every once in a while, I would just see Commodus. Like, I would see the unhinged Emperor of Rome.
All right. I feel like we're starting to talk in circles here.
And another thing, Lady Gaga.
Yes. What about her?
Yeah, she did a great job.
Yeah, I thought great job all around. Except
as a young male, young middle-aged male, whatever. I was able to relate to her just fine.
Yeah. In fact, like you said earlier, you could have leaned even more into her role. I think it would have benefited the movie.
Yeah. All right.
I guess it's time to wrap up, right? Nothing else to say on Joker 2?
No, I think that's it. We didn't do the traditional scene-by-scene recap like we usually do. We're experimental filmmakers just like Todd Phillips.
Exactly. And I called you yesterday, and I was partly this is because I just didn't want to go scene by scene with this. I called you right after walking out of the movie. I mean, at the end of the movie. I didn't walk out in the middle, but the emotion I was left with was like that was exhausting, and I don't want to relive it. So let's just do a quick recap at the beginning, and then we'll just have an open dialogue about it. You can always let us know in the comments which format you like better. But as we recommended for filmmakers, we're not going to pander to you. Just because you want it one way, that's a data point. Doesn't mean we're going to listen to you. All right.
But if you sign up for a membership on YouTube or you subscribe on Patreon, then we will pander to you 100%.
That's right. The problem is that our young male audience, they just can't relate to Daniel. All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for watching. By the way, if you're watching and you want to just listen to us, you can find us in any podcast app. If you're listening to us and want to watch us, have a look at the show notes. There's a link to the YouTube channel where this stuff is posted every week. So, with that, thank you for listening and see you on the next
One Take.